Weekly dividend paying ETFs are something we've never seen in the stock market before, but as of recently and trending, they are all the craze. So here are 25 weekly paying dividend ETFs that have somewhat of a history. There are more on the way, such as the ones from Granite Shares with their new Yield Boost ETFs, but those don't have too much of a history. We're focusing on this list of 25 that have been paying out weekly dividends for at least a week or two. Now, let's jump right into our list. And they're going to be 5 categories. S tier is obviously going to be the best. A tier is good, B is average, C is below average, and D is going to be the worst. Now we're going to start with CHPY, and this is a YieldMax ETF. So we're going to start with all the YieldMax ETFs, go into the Roundhills, and then the Defiance ETFs. And as we can see, it's mostly made up of 3 different companies. We do have a money market fund as well, but 3 different companies have a ton of these weekly paying ETFs, and they have a history of paying out these weekly dividend ETFs for a few weeks now. So CHPY is the YieldMax Semiconductor Portfolio Option Income ETF, and it currently has a forward distribution rate of about 40%. If we take a look at the stock price, it's been doing actually pretty well since April 3rd, which is right after the Liberation Day. So a lot of stocks were at a nice discount. So that is partly due to the reason why it has a 10% return in share price alone. We do want to mention that this distribution rate that we're seeing is based off of its last dividend. And as we can see, it's paid out a cash amount of about 34 cents per share. June 5th was the ex-dividend for that. And that is going to be that 40% distribution rate that we're seeing. So we take a look at the holdings, we can see it's a fairly diversified ETF, which is very good to see. A lot of people are buying a lot of these single stock ETFs, and that is just taking on a lot of risk. With this ETF, you have over 20 companies. Broadcom and NVIDIA are going to be some of the largest holdings. We also have Qualcomm, Taiwan Semiconductor, Micron Technology, a lot of great semiconductor holdings, and this is especially good since it's going to be useful for a lot of AI technology. And if we take a look at the total return and we compare it to the S&P 500 since the Liberation Day, we can see we're up almost 23%, which is pretty huge considering the S&P 500 is only up 10%. And this is only within a 2-month time frame because CHPY has only been out for about Now, even though it has a solid 23% return, that's because this fund came out right after Liberation Day, where stocks were at a huge discount. So it's a bit biased and timing of when this was released. So we're going to place this at an A tier. Next ETF on our list is going to be GPTY, the YieldMax AI and Tech Portfolio Option Income ETF. It has a little more stable share price, but we are going to have great diversification with over 20 companies, and we have really good solid holdings: NVIDIA, Palantir, AMD, Tesla, Microsoft. It's a little bit more stable, higher quality companies, but in return we're getting less. We take a look at the distribution rate based off of its last dividend, it's going to be about 30. But because the NAV is a little bit more stable, we can actually see it's outperforming CHPY by 7% during the same time frame. But year-to-date return, it's only up 1.88% because it came out in early February. I think this has great diversification, and we're going to be placing it at A tier as well. It's going to have similar returns to CHPY. Now next is going to be LFGY, which has a distribution rate of about 64%. And it's the crypto industry and tech portfolio option income ETF. And if we take a look at the dividend history, it's been pretty stable, paying between 40 cents and 50 cents per share every single week. And if you take a look at the holdings, we have Coinbase, MicroStrategy as some of its top holdings, as well as a Bitcoin Trust ETF. Similar to those 2 other ETFs, the share price looks pretty similar with the chart. But in my opinion, I think that it's pretty unnecessary to have MicroStrategy, Coinbase, Bitcoin. I would personally invest solely in Bitcoin or MicroStrategy or even MSTY, which is a monthly pair and it's not going to be on our list, but it does have good returns, very similar to these other 2. Diversified portfolio, it's going to be a solid A tier. Now next we have RDTY, the 0 days to expiry covered call strategy ETF on the Russell 2000 index, and it has a distribution rate of 35%. I'm a huge fan of these 0 day to expiry ETFs, but it's going to be the same exact strategy, pretty similar to the Roundhill ETFs. So YieldMax was pretty much just copying their strategy because of how. For that reason, these are just average ETFs. I'm going to place RDT in the B tier, which is just average. And then same goes for the other two. QDTY is going to be the NASDAQ 100 index, same exact strategy, as well as SDTY, which is going to be the S&P. Next, we have ULTY, the YieldMax Ultra Option Income Strategy ETF with a distribution rate of 80% based off of its last dividend. Now, this was an ETF that was notorious for being very bad. As we can see earlier in the past year, it was at a share price of $20 per share, and it just kept dropping and dropping with no signs of NAV recovery or stability. But they did change the strategy. They went from monthly to weekly payments, as well as buying protective puts. So there's not as much downside risk. And in my opinion, it's a great strategy. They've stabilized the price, and it's always recovered ever since it went to the weekly payments. And the best thing about it is they now hold shares. They used to also be a synthetic covered call strategy, but they're holding shares and they're choosing better companies now. We have Tesla, NVIDIA, Reddit. We have the triple leveraged NASDAQ index, Palantir, and there's also some MicroStrategy in this ETF, as well as the Direction, Daily Small Capable 3X shares. So we're hoping that all of this can continue, but for now, it's going to go into our S tier. It has had phenomenal returns ever since it changed its strategy and went to weekly payments. Now next we have YMAG, the Magnificent 7 Fund of Option Income ETFs, with a distribution rate of, and if we take a look at the holdings, it's basically their option income strategy ETFs on their single stock tickers on the Magnificent 7. Now, I used to be a huge fan of this ETF. It's had reliable payments and it has a really good holdings of the Magnificent 7, but it has been dropping lately since the Liberation Day, and it hasn't had too much of a recovery, but is still one of the more reliable weekly payers. It's slightly diversified, and I still have shares of this ETF paying me every single week. For that reason, I'm going to be placing it in. Next, we have YMAX, the Universe Fund of Option Income ETFs, with a distribution rate of about 70%. Now, this is pretty much their bread and butter ETF, and it's done pretty similar performance to YMAG. But if we take a look at the holdings, it pretty much has all of their single stock ticker ETFs inside of this portfolio. So there's going to be almost 30 holdings. So it's pretty diversified. You can't really go wrong if you're trying to decide which one of these ETFs you want to invest in. But it does have some bad ETFs in here that you do want to keep in mind. But diversify is king. And for that reason, since it's their flagship ETF, we're going to be. Next, we have a bit of an odd one, which is actually going to be Texas Capital Government Money Market ETF, MMKT, which is pretty much a money market ETF, as the name implies, but it pays out. As we can see, it's been paying out on an average about 7 to 8 cents per share every single week. And similar to ETFs in this class, it doesn't lose any value. We do see these spikes, but that's only going to be because it's accounting for its dividend payment. But ETFs should not drop below $100 per share, and it's just a place to park your cash. You're not going to make a ton of money, and it's going to be around a 4%. Now, I personally think there are some better options to park your cash, such as SGov, even though that pays out monthly, but you're getting a higher. And for this reason, we're actually going to be placing it in D tier. And especially since it has a 20% expense ratio, which is a lot higher than its competitor. Next, we have AAPW, which is going to be part of the Roundhill Investments weekly pay family. And it's going to have a distribution rate of about 35%. But if we take a look at the chart, it's not doing too well. There's not much volatility with Apple compared to some of the other stocks. And for those reasons, we're going to be placing AAPW in D tier. Now next we have COIW, the Coinbase Weekly Pay ETF, and we also want to keep in mind that all of these weekly pay ETFs by Roundhill are not your typical synthetic covered call ETFs. They're actually 1.2 times leveraged. So that is one of the reasons why you can see some steep declines as well as very high price volatility within these covered call ETFs, and it's because of that leverage. Now, if you're very bullish on these underlying stocks, because remember, these are all single stock ticker ETFs, then they could be a good play. But keep in mind, it's leveraged and it's going to be much more volatile than some of the other weekly paying ETFs on this list. But Coinbase has done really well, especially the weekly pay ETF for COIW, and for that reason, we will be placing it in C tier. Now, next we have MAGY, the Roundhill Magnificent 7 cover call ETF, and this is very similar to YieldMax's Magnificent 7 YMAG, and it's a great ETF. And unlike the other single stock ticker ETFs, this one's not leveraged. So it does have its Roundhill Magnificent 7 ETF, which is a very good ETF to hold if you're very bullish on those Magnificent 7 stocks. But it's been doing really well in terms of its dividend payments, and a lot of people are very happy with this. It's a little bit too early to tell about the performance compared to YMAG, which has a longer history, and for that reason, we're replacing MAGY into the B tier. Now, next we have NVDW, which is going to be the single stock ticker ETFs for the weekly pays, and NVDA has done pretty well over the long run, and it's a very good ETF, especially with its dividends. It has very high dividends, just like the YieldMax one, but of course it's also leveraged. But I do think it's one of the better weekly pay ETFs. Not much history, but I think it will do pretty well. And I think we will be placing that into the B tier. Now, next we have PLTW, the Palantir weekly pay ETF. And it's done pretty well since inception. It's actually up in price compared to the other ETFs. And it pays a much higher dividend than compared to the other Roundhill ETFs. For this reason, we're actually going to be placing this at A tier. Now, next we actually have the Roundhill Innovation 100 0 days to expiry covered call ETF strategy. Even though this chart looks scary, it does what it's supposed to. The strategy is good and it's been paying out consistently. We see this huge drop because of the Liberation Day, but it's going to slowly recover, and we can see it's recovering somewhat well ever since April 1st. And it does have a pretty good dividend yield because the NASDAQ 100 is a little bit more volatile, so we get a higher dividend yield. And for this reason, we're going to be placing it into the A tier. Now, RDTE is going to be very similar. I'm a huge fan of Roundhill's 0 days to expiry covered call ETFs, and for this reason, we're going to be placing RDTE, which is going to be on the Russell 2000 index, same exact strategy, into the A tier. Now, next we have TSLW, another single stock weekly pay ETF, and it's very volatile, as we can see, because of the leverage. The dividends are actually very high. We can see it's been paying out between 40 cents and 50 cents per share every single week. It's been performing a lot better than YieldMax's TSLY, and for this reason, we're going to be placing it actually into the B tier. Now, next we have the weekly T-bill ETF WEEK, and just like the money market fund that we have here, this is going to be a place to park your cash. You're not going to get rich off of it. It pays about a 4% annual dividend split into every single week. So if we take a look at the dividend history, it pays about 7 to 8 cents every single week. And this is really just a place to park your uninvested cash or any cash you need in the short term. And it's very safe. It's pretty much risk-free because it's a T-bill ETF. It's never going to drop below $100 per share, so your capital is safe. And for this reason, we're actually going to be placing it into C tier. It's much better than MMKT, but I do believe SGov is a much better pick to park your cash. Now, next we have XDTE, which is going to be a same strategy as QDTE and RDTE, except it's going to be on the S&P 500 index. I'm a huge fan of the 0 days to expire covered call ETFs, and XDTE has done really well. Next we have YBTC, the Roundhill Bitcoin covered call strategy ETF, and this is a very good Bitcoin ETF, and the best thing about this ETF is it pays weekly dividends compared to some of the other Bitcoin covered call ETFs which pay out monthly. we can see the share price, it's pretty good, and then it has a really high dividend yield of about 45%. You're getting some really high cash amounts for these dividends. So we're actually going to be placing YBTC at an A tier. Now next we have some Defiance funds. The first one is going to be IWMY, which is the Russell 2000 Options Income ETF. And as we can take a look at the chart, it's been going down and down. It's very similar to what ULTY has been doing before they changed the strategy. And I don't know if this ETF has changed its strategy because it does look like it's more stable since April, but time will tell. And it's doing really well since April. But before then, these were some of the worst ETFs to invest in because the NAV just kept going down and down. In my opinion, there's better options other than IWMY that are on this list, and for that reason, we're actually going to be placing it into the C tier. Now next we have one of the first MSTR weekly paying ETFs. It's going to be the Defiance Leverage Long Income ETF, and it's similar to those Roundhill weekly pay ETFs, where this is actually 1.2 times leveraged while employing an options strategy. So if you're very bullish on a MicroStrategy, this is a great ETF because you're going to get that capital appreciation, which we're not really seeing with MSTY, the monthly paying ETF by YieldMax. And so far, MSTY has been paying out some really high dividends. So every single week, as we see with these cash amounts, it's about 1.5% of the share price. Placing this into B tier because it's too new to tell, but it's doing really good. But in my opinion, I would rather invest directly into MSTY or even MST itself. Next, we have Y, the 0 days to expiry income ETF by Defiance based on the NASDAQ 100, and similar to IWMY, the share price has been dropping and dropping. And recently, I'm not sure if they changed their strategy as I mentioned earlier, but we don't know why it hasn't stabilized in price compared to some of the other ETFs on this list. And for that reason, we're going to be placing into the C tier. Next, we have WDTE, the S&P 500, same strategy as those other two ETFs, but the share price doesn't drop as much compared to those other ETFs. And I like the S&P 500 index the best for this kind of strategy. Actually, going to be placing WDTE into the B tier because it's been performing much better than IWMY as well as QQQY. I'm not sure if you agree with these tier lists. Of course, this is just my opinion, and there's some things that could probably be moved around, like maybe CHPY or GPTY, LFGY. Some of these YieldMax ETFs could also be in the S tier. It's very close. But let me know in the comments where you would rank some of these ETFs. What are your favorite ETFs on this list that you would switch around and in your opinion is a much better fit? This is just my personal opinion, how I would rank them and how I would favor them in terms of ranking.